everyone. Welcome to this information session on the PETAA National Teaching of Reading Survey 2024. My name's Megan Edwards. I'm the CEO of PETAA, and I will be co-presenting this webinar along with PETAA President, Dr. Helen Adam, who's joining us over from WA.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you all for... Oh, sorry, Helen.
That's okay.
Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us. I know a lot of you will already have had a full-on day. So there's a lot of information to get through, and Helen and I are going to try and usher you through it in an efficient but informed manner. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. First of all, we'll start at the best place with a quick introduction. So in 2024, PETAA conducted its first national survey on the teaching of reading. The topic of reading instruction is extensively researched, debated, and as all of you joining us today know, often contentious. Media headlines frequently suggest teachers lack the requisite knowledge, yet public discourse rarely includes teachers' own voices. We sought direct insights from teachers about classroom practices, examining the skills, knowledge, approaches, and strategies used daily. For anyone wanting to understand the details of our survey methodology, scope, and limitations, please see the full report available on our website. Firstly, we're going to look at the demographics of our survey respondents. We had 500 teachers from across Australia respond to our survey, representing all three government systems. School systems, both government, Catholic, and independent, and diverse professional roles. Classroom teachers constituted 54% of our respondents. It's worth noting that 87% of survey respondents were aged 40 plus. And our survey was open to both PETAA members and non-members, as we have had a few questions around that, so I wanted to clarify. We'll dive in now to the survey, the meat of the survey, looking at teaching reading within and beyond the literacy block. The first key section of the survey tackled how much time was spent on reading instruction by primary teachers on a weekly basis, including a close look at exactly what was being taught in relation to reading. Primary classroom teachers in our survey dedicated approximately 6 hours weekly to reading instruction. The reported time was slightly higher than that among school leaders and significantly higher among EALD specialists, who reported around 9 hours weekly. As you can see in the graph before you, some clear patterns emerged across year levels. Foundation teachers typically allocated 5 to 8 hours weekly to reading instruction, and this average increased in years 1 to 2. A notable downward shift occurred, however, in years 3 to 4, with 42% of teachers reporting 5 or fewer hours weekly of explicit reading instruction. Years 5 to 6 teachers reported the fewest hours spent overall on average. Digging a little further, our data reveals that 98% of early years teachers, foundation or equivalent, address all 5 key components of reading instruction within their literacy blocks. This comprehensive approach continues throughout the primary years, with most teachers dedicating up to 20 minutes daily to each component. However, we want to note that our survey did not explicitly measure inclusion of CONSA's 6th component of oral language, which all of you here who are very familiar with PETAA know that we certainly do support, advocate for, and have significant resources on. So that was an oversight on our part. Teachers strategically shift their instructional emphasis as students progress through year levels. Time allocated to phonics decreases after the early years, with greater attention given to word knowledge, orthography, morphology and etymology, and spelling, of course, in the upper primary years. Conversely, we saw comprehension instruction increases in later years. Whereas only 25% of F to 2 teachers spend more than 20 minutes daily on comprehension, 44% of teachers in years 3 to 6 spend more than 20 minutes. For most teachers in both F to 2 and 3 to 6, literacy extends well beyond the set literacy or English block. In particular, teachers dedicate considerable time to the unconstrained skills of comprehension and vocabulary, as well as taking the opportunity to further develop fluency. These choices reinforce the importance of meaning making and vocabulary development as essential components of the knowledge and understanding needed in other learning areas. The survey also explored teachers' use of commercial phonics programs and different types of text in early reading instruction. 63% of respondents reported using commercial phonics programs, mentioning over 20 different products. It is important to note that an absence of a commercial phonics program does not mean a teacher or school is not systematically and explicitly teaching phonics. They could be using a freely available program or a school-created program. Moving over to consider comprehension strategy instruction. Most respondents teach a range of comprehension strategies at least weekly, and often more frequently. Here at PETAA, we could surmise, due to the range of strategies explicitly taught, that teachers are drawing upon evidence-informed practice, where the goal of strategy instruction in comprehension is for students to flexibly apply these strategies as needed to make meaning when reading. The next section of our survey focused on instructional practices, groupings, and approaches to teaching reading. For this section of the report, we analysed only the answers of those respondents who identified as a classroom teacher or school leader, as questions about whole class versus small groups became redundant with those respondents who are in job roles who only ever work with small groups of students, for example, in an intervention approach. The survey data here reveal widespread use of teacher-led reading instruction across primary education at all year levels. However, it is notable that 30% of foundation teachers use teacher-led reading instruction multiple times a day. And on the flip side, only 16% of foundation teachers report using teacher-led reading instruction only twice a week or less. This finding does raise important questions, though, about instructional consistency during this formative stage of reading development. Our data revealed clear patterns in how teachers organise reading instruction. As illustrated in the graph before you, most teachers across F to 6 employ whole class instruction as their primary approach to reading instruction. Groups of same ability students represent the second most frequently used configuration, while mixed ability groupings are utilised least often. Year level comparisons reveal significant differences in grouping practices. Foundation teachers are most likely to provide individualised instruction regularly. Lower year levels tend to organise students into same ability groups. Conversely, upper primary teachers more frequently implement mixed ability groupings. Notably, 11% of teachers across F to 6 rarely or never use small groups of any kind, with 7% of respondents reporting they rely almost exclusively on whole class instruction. Moving on to instructional strategies or routines, we can see from this graph that read alouds represent the most prevalent teaching strategy, followed by intentional teacher talk, independent reading, and shared reading. Readers' theatre, close reading, and language experience activities appear least frequently in teachers' repertoires. Close reading supports a cognitive approach to teaching reading, but it is still a newer practice for many. It is teacher-led and therefore higher on teacher responsibility and explicit teaching. The use of this approach may be likely to increase in the future, with more jurisdictions focusing on explicit teaching. When asked how they adapt their reading instruction throughout the school year, teachers identified several common practices, including using formative and summative assessment data to guide adjustments, responding to student engagement and motivation levels, modifying student groupings, including fluency partnerships, progressively increasing the text complexity, adjusting instructional time allocated to specific reading components, gradually increasing opportunities for independent reading, following the gradual release of responsibility model, I do, we do, you do, and differentiating for individual student goals and needs. Our survey also investigated how frequently teachers and students use different types of texts. When examining F to 2 trends specifically in this area, 57% of teachers used decodables most or every day in their instruction or modelling, i.e. the teachers themselves were using these texts. Meanwhile, 74% of teachers in the F to 2 bracket ensured their students used decodable texts most or every day. 29% also used predictable texts themselves, with 39% having students directly engaging with predictable texts. As noted in our report, there can be a role for predictable text, as noted also by Shanahan, but after decoding is established. They may also be used for students who are struggling readers to supplement their learning. 69% of F to 6 teachers use authentic literary texts daily for their teacher-led instruction or modelling. When it came to factoring in student choice to selecting reading materials, 71% of educators give students this agency at least once a week, but 17% reported offering this opportunity rarely or never to their students. Considering when to transition students from decodable to authentic texts, teachers reported similar rates of transitioning students upon mastery of the basic code versus waiting for extended code mastery. This variation suggests a need for clearer evidence-based guidelines whilst preserving teachers' professional judgment based on individual student needs. It is worth noting this question allowed teachers to select more than one answer. Half of those who selected non-applicable, as you can see in the pink-purple colour on the slide before you, were classroom teachers of older year levels, aged 3 to 6 or secondary. Our survey also examined teachers' use of diverse texts, those featuring varied authors, illustrators, and characters of different genders, races, cultures, and abilities. Teachers use a variety of opportunities to incorporate diverse texts, as shown in the graph on the left. But 10% of respondents indicated they either don't consider or don't include diverse books in their teaching at all. 78% of teachers reported high or very high confidence in using a diverse range of texts in their classrooms and teaching. The diversity of contemporary Australian classrooms certainly creates challenges for all of you across planning, resources, and instructional delivery. When asked about their greatest challenges in differentiating reading instruction, the teachers responding to our survey identified several consistent themes, and unsurprisingly, I'm sure to all of you, time, resources, and a lack of access to professional learning came out consistently as those greatest challenges. We then went on to explore specific strategies teachers employed to differentiate for students with diverse learning needs. Respondents could select multiple approaches from provided options. As the graph before you illustrates, utilising learning support staff for additional one-to-one instruction emerged as one of the most frequently employed strategies, followed by individualised text selection and needs-based grouping. It's worth noting that most respondents implement at least 2 different differentiation strategies. Only 6% of respondents selected one single approach for supporting diverse learners. Regarding EALD student support specifically, we analysed open-ended responses, and they revealed 10 key strategies: scaffolded instruction, background knowledge development, an emphasis on oral language, explicit vocabulary instruction, peer collaboration, specialist collaboration, visual support, small group or individual support, strategic text selection, and technology integration. Our final section of the survey looked at teachers' professional and theoretical knowledge, as well as collaboration amongst teachers or networks to keep developing their understanding of the teaching of reading. When asking teachers about the theory underpinning their teaching of reading, 71% said they used a reading model to inform their approach. The most mentioned model by far was Scarborough's rope, with Gough's simple view of reading coming in second, but with 50% as many mentions as Scarborough's rope. Other frameworks mentioned included the Big Six, the active view of reading, science of reading, and a balanced approach. We then moved on to unpack whole school approaches, with 34% of respondents reporting their school does not have a whole school approach to reading. Another 14% reported that their school had one in progress. Next, we examined the materials and resources that teachers use in their reading instruction, with respondents selecting all applicable options. 70% of teachers are creating their own or using staff or team created resources. 62% also use third-party created units, such as those that PETAA produces for our members. Only 35% of respondents use their department or system created units. Our survey also explored teachers' professional development practices and their sources of instructional guidance. The data show that online blogs, newsletters, and journals represent teachers' most frequently accessed resources on a weekly basis, closely followed by social media. Department or system-wide professional learning events were least commonly reported. We also investigated teachers' collaborative practices regarding reading instruction. The most common weekly collaborative activities included discussing how to teach specific reading concepts, collaboratively planning and documenting reading instruction, and sharing reading instruction knowledge with colleagues. Conversely, the least common practices, reported as either rarely or never occurring, were visiting colleagues' classrooms and modelling reading practices for feedback. Teacher competence represents a critical component of effective instruction. Our survey reveals that over 75% of respondents felt confident or very confident in both their pedagogical approaches and content knowledge related to reading instruction. For example, phonemic awareness, morphological knowledge, comprehension strategies and skills, and so on. And finally, as we come to our conclusions and key recommendations, I will hand over to Helen Adam, PETAA President.
Thanks, Megan. And excuse me if I'm not looking straight at your camera because I've got the notes over on this other screen. So in reviewing the survey and acknowledging the limitations that are noted a little bit earlier and in the actual report, we've drawn several significant conclusions. Firstly, the majority of teachers, over 75%, express high confidence in their pedagogical practices and knowledge related to teaching reading. They effectively adjust instructional focus according to developmental needs. They transition from largely code-based emphases in early years to greater comprehension focus in upper primary. And we highlight that while there's this emphasis on code breaking through to comprehension, it doesn't mean that comprehension and meaning making are neglected in the early years. It just means that the key focus is on getting the children to get the code, understand the code. Secondly, most teachers, 82%, employ teacher reading instruction at least 3 to 4 days a week, indicating strong alignment with evidence-based approaches. The literacy block remains a cornerstone of reading instruction, with 98% of early years teachers addressing all 5 key pillars of reading within this dedicated time. There is significant variety in how literacy blocks are structured and implemented across schools, reflecting both teacher autonomy, but also potentially some inconsistent practices. Excuse me. Next, teachers demonstrate nuanced understandings of appropriate text types, with early years teachers appropriately emphasising decodable texts while maintaining exposure to authentic texts. There's also evidence of appropriate progression in text complexity as students develop reading proficiency. Sorry about this. Additionally, teachers consistently identify the wide range of student abilities within their classrooms as their greatest challenge in reading instruction. Time constraints and resource limitations create significant barriers to effective differentiation. There is a substantial reliance on learning support staff, 70%, for differentiation, which potentially creates inequities between well-resourced and under-resourced schools. Teachers primarily rely on self-directed learning through online resources, blogs, and social media, rather than formal professional development opportunities. Only a small percentage of teachers engage in regular collaborative discussions about reading instruction with colleagues. 65% of teachers are not using the department government-provided materials, instead preferring to create their own or use school-based resources. I'm so sorry about this. Very dry throat today. You might have wet weather over there, we don't. And finally, only 50% of teachers reported working within a whole school approach to reading, with 41 having school-created approaches and 9% using commercial programs. This suggests perhaps potential inconsistency in reading instruction approaches, both within and across schools, and perhaps a lack of guidance or structure for early career teachers. So that leads us to our key recommendations. So we have 6 key recommendations from this report, and these had different suggestions to schools as opposed to systems or government. Today's webinar, since we're joined by schools, we'll just be running through the school recommendations, but you can see our recommendations to systems and governments in the full report. So our first key recommendation is to develop and implement consistent whole school approaches. What does this mean for schools? It means establishing clear whole school reading frameworks that maintain teacher autonomy while ensuring instructional coherence and continuity across year levels. Schools should ensure teachers have both the knowledge of the essential elements of reading instruction, including the foundational element of oral language and the skills to teach reading effectively. And I'm going to go a little bit rogue here. It's not in my notes, but whole school instruction does not mean everybody teaching exactly the same way, the same pattern. We're not talking about whole school commercial programs as such. We're talking about whole school approaches, the ethos and the principles of teaching reading, the approaches that you use within your classroom, rigorous ways of capturing children for early intervention, these kind of principles that guide, and so that everyone knows that they're all on the same page with the same goals and principles at the heart of it. And I can go further into that later if anyone would like to. But I just wanted to really make clear that there's a big difference between a whole school approach and a whole school mandated one way to do things. So a mandated one way to do things can certainly be a whole school approach, but we're not saying that that is what we mean by the need for whole school approaches. Secondly, the importance of addressing time and resource constraints. For schools, this means allocating protected time for collaborative planning and discussing of reading instruction. The number of teachers in this survey has said, we just want to be able to talk to our colleagues and to see what each other is doing. And that's a really important thing that schools could support with. Enhance professional development and collaboration by establishing structured professional learning communities which support teachers to engage in collaborative practice such as the aforementioned peer classroom observations, reflection and feedback focused specifically on reading instruction. Fourthly, strengthen support for differentiation by ensuring clear support processes and structures between the varied teams within a school to understand student needs, including those that require extension as well as those that require extra support, and aligning the expertise of classroom teachers, learning support staff, and pedagogic coaches or leaders in planning for differentiation. Diversifying reading materials and approaches by reviewing the classroom and library collections to ensure they include diverse authors and perspectives. And anyone who's familiar with my work will know that that's a really important part of my own research, and the evidence that supports giving children access to books that reflect their worlds, their lives, their backgrounds makes an enormous difference to their engagement and ultimately to their learning outcomes. Support professional learning for teachers, which includes how to engage with diverse texts where students see themselves and others represented, which develops understanding and empathy through critical reflection. So those higher order skills that go with really being a critically literate person. And finally, support early career teachers by implementing structured mentoring programs, pairing experienced and early career teachers specifically focused on reading instruction. And I think that can be a reciprocal relationship too, where early career teachers can come in with some fresh ideas and the experienced teachers, they can work very closely together, which I think will bring huge strength to schools. So next steps, we really encourage you to take the report back to schools, discuss how PETAA's resources and expertise can support you to act on the findings through whether it's through the professional learnings that we offer, through teacher reflection or leadership planning. So that's a pretty good effort going through all of that in 25 minutes. But we wanted to sort of get through the key aspects so that we can allow for any question and answers. So is someone going to moderate that for us, Megan?
Well, I can moderate that, Ellen. That's no problem. So I'll stop sharing the screen for now. I can always pop it back up if anyone wanted me to display a particular slide again. And yes, so we'd like to encourage you to, if you've got any questions, comments, queries, and what have you, you can either pop it in the chat. If you're someone who'd rather stay on mute, keep your camera off, or of course, please, yes, take yourself off mute. and join in to to ask any questions that you might have. We know that's a lot of information that we've dumped on you, yes, in the last 25 minutes. So give everyone a minute
some
or
thinking
so.
time.
Yes. So to give sort of a little bit more background, I suppose this was the first time PETAA had ever done a major survey of this kind. I think it was a fantastic sort of learning experience for us as a member organisation, but also a wider peak body for primary teachers in this space. And it's been very exciting, yes, taking the report out and seeing the media uptake. Hopefully all of you have seen some of the good news stories, shock horror, even in the mainstream media recently, as a result of the findings in the report, and so on. So first question in from Karen. Thank you, Karen. A good one to start, Helen. So in your experience, what does an effective whole school approach? It's a really easy one to start from, Karen.
All right, it'll take me the rest of the session. Look, I think there's some core elements that a really high quality whole school approach would have. That's firstly, you need leadership and vision. So, where your senior leadership is actively championing reading as a priority, that there's a clear reading policy with specific aims and implementation strategies, and, hopefully a designated reading coordinator or a literacy lead to oversee this approach. But that's sort of at the top level. But then you need at curriculum design level, in making sure that reading is embedded across the curriculum, not just seen as a subject in its own and not just part of English. They think there are things that you've got to have your structured phonics program in your early years. You need progressive development of comprehension strategies as students advance. And then things like protected time for some independent reading, regular read alouds, these kind of things that often get pushed to the side. When you have a whole school approach, you can go, actually, we need protected time for these skills development, protected time for the practice of these skills. You need a learning environment where, that is print rich with well-stocked inviting library spaces within classrooms and in the library, digital resources. Then there's things like your teacher development, and we've seen that come through really strongly. Do we have regular staff training? Are there opportunities for teachers to develop consistent approaches? Do we have at assessment and intervention level, do we have robust systems to identify struggling readers early and targeted interventions in those cases? Are you regularly monitoring progress? Are we making data-informed decisions about reading instruction coupled with teacher knowledge and teacher, awareness? I mean, it's the first eight school standard, isn't it? Know your children and how they learn. So data and teacher knowledge going together, involving the community, the parental engagement, and developing of a reading culture that really values reading as a skill that needs to be learnt and mastered, but as something that's, to me, that's joyful and important to life, not just, as I said, not just something that kids have to learn. So, that's my vision of, and as I said to you earlier, I've gone rogue a little bit on this because I knew it would come up. So I did put some notes together. But, I think it is this whole school view of the importance of reading and what does that mean at those different levels. So I hope that answers your question well enough there, Michelle, and more than happy for, not Michelle, sorry, Karen, more than happy for anyone to pop their own ideas and responses to that into the chat as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helen. Our next question was from Tamara Reed, just wondering if there was some guidance in the survey around what it meant by diverse books. Did it cover both diverse authors as well as characters and settings? And yes, Tamara, I can confirm that we were clear on that. And we list out that by diverse books, yes, we meant range of authors, illustrators, characters, settings, and the range of diversity as well. It wasn't just necessarily racial diversity, it was gender diversity, cultural diversity, ability diversity, and so on. The next question from Clorinda was about PETAA possibly creating some online learning focusing on the areas of recommendation. So Clorinda, yes, we have in progress at the moment, behind the scenes, we're working on professional learning course aimed at supporting leaders to develop and implement consistent whole school approaches to the teaching of reading. We certainly already have a course actually based on the work of Helen Adam on diversifying reading materials and the use of diverse books in your classroom practice.
And a book.
And a book, yes. Sorry, it was on a specific question on the online learning. Sorry, yes, we also have.
No, you're fine. That's fine.
We also have a course on differentiation. We are also in very early days of specifically getting a course together on literacy intervention. They're based on your second question there, Clorinda. We have a course on supporting struggling readers in upper primary, but that's very much focused on reluctant readers. Sorry, I should clarify, not struggling. And so those readers who can read but sort of choose not to or reluctant to for a variety of reasons. So yes, we've got there, and others based on the results that we saw through the survey, we have in the works. Thank you. Thank you for your further comments, Karen, Tamara, Clorinda. Thank you, Tim. Good to have you join us today.
Yeah.
And Tim Warwick, for those of you also joining us and interested particularly in equity differentiation, supporting all of our students. Tim is a former board member of PETA's and founder of the Equity Alliance. And Tim, actually, maybe if you wouldn't mind popping a link in the chat. So anyone interested in exploring, it's a non-profit, initiative, and Tim's always looking for active and keen members to join in over there. So if that's something that you're particularly interested in joining us today, please check out the Equity Alliance. So I think that may have drawn us to a close. So beyond the professional learning options, however, we are going to be focusing on creating a suite of resources for our members that are included in the membership, particularly focused on the whole school approaches. For any of you who are members and haven't seen, we actually, and Cassie, if you could pop a link in, please, we have just done a very fresh update on our most popular ever paper on exploring the reading models. If you feel you are in a school environment that doesn't have a consistent whole school approach, that paper is a great place to start. It unpacks the key reading models, the affordances and constraints of them. And we are aware of a lot of our member schools who that's exactly where they started with their whole school approach, sitting down as a staff, using that paper to spark conversation, discussion, and professional brainstorming, if you like, around the whole school approach. So yeah, that paper is, of course, included, available to all of our members. And yes, freshly updated. I think we just updated it last week with the author Bron Parkins. So hot off the press. Thank you, Cassie.
Yeah.
So I think at that point, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Helen, thank you from me for joining us today. And yes, thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Megan, too.
Heavy session.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ellen.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.